Behind every great result, there's a story of innovation and collaboration.
There's a lot more collaboration between our customer and us, and it's because we can share data.
Our Proficy software customers aren't just clients, they're partners in progress. For more than 20 years, we've worked with you to accelerate the digital revolution and drive real results within your industrial operations.
The software takes production data and used to make sure that machine operators and managers are able to make the right decisions at the right time.
Proficy isn't just a tool, it's the engine driving your success forward, and the solution enabling your enterprise to decrease costs, increase profits, reduce waste, improve efficiency, and much more.
The data's in the Proficy system.
But it's not just about the numbers, it's about the people. Together, we empower teams, accelerate innovation, and drive toward a future that's brighter, more sustainable, and more profitable than ever before. We invite you to experience the power of smart and sustainable operations with Proficy from GE Vernova.
Good morning and welcome to our webinar today entitled Talk Data to Me, Collection, Management, and Utilization. Today's event is part of our System Integrator educational series called Tech Talk and is intended to raise awareness and knowledge of our new products, enhancements, and technology trends with the goal of helping our SIs improve productivity, solve customer challenges, and to uncover new revenue opportunities. So my name is Paul Adams, and I'm the Director of the Solution Provider Program here in the Americas. As a systems integrator, your expertise is invaluable to your customers, and today we intend to provide you with information that can add further value to your install base. Specifically, we'll talk about the importance of data and how we can utilize it to be a make or break for a successful digital transformation project. Let me introduce our speaker, Brian Johnson. Brian is the product manager for Proficy Historian Cloud, and the Data Hub at GE Vernova. He is a certified Agile product owner and has worked in product development and product management for a decade. He has a passion for driving digital transformations and new technology adoption with a focus on cloud technologies. Brian has an undergrad degree from Harvard University and certificates in digital transformation from Cornell University. Today, Brian will talk a bit about streamlining data collection from diverse sources, improving data quality and governance for trustworthy insights, leveraging data management tools to enhance scalability and performance, and driving analytics and visualization that fuel smarter operations. So just a few things, our safe harbor statement, you're used to seeing this. We may show you some things that are on the roadmap that are not committed right now. So you can always check back with us in terms of features, functionality, to ensure things will be in the releases as they come out. And then just want to do a little bit of a housekeeping before we get started. So you should see these icons on your screen, the orange chat bubble. You can submit questions today throughout the session. We will try to get to them as part of this session, but if we can't get to them, we'll answer them and follow up via email. The purple email icon, you can contact myself for more information about our solution provider program. Always love to hear from our partners, so please reach out to me if you want to have a discussion. Love to hear about what's working in the field. The blue paperclip icon, you can get several additional resources, including training and product information, as well as additional ways to hear updates from us. Through the question mark icon, you can get technical assistance, but as I learned right before this session, just refreshing your browser fixes most things with the environment. We also have a feedback survey available through the pink icon here, the pink clipboard icon, where we'd love to hear your feedback and hear what you're experiencing with your customers. You know, this program gets much better when we hear what's working, what's not working. So please take some time to fill that out. Give us some feedback. We want to make sure we're enabling you to support GE software in the field. We will be recording this webinar today, so we'll send it out via email. So be on the lookout for that, so you can reference that later as needed. So with that, Brian, I'm going to send it over to you to go through the content.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Johnson, like Paul said, and we're going to be spending about an hour together this morning, this afternoon, this evening, depending on where you are in the globe, talking about data, manipulation, governance, tools that may be important. So hopefully we have a really exciting session and folks are ready to learn. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send them in and we'll take them at the end. All right. So I wanted to start today with a key concept for 2025, something that I think we're seeing more and more, right? You can't turn on the news today without seeing a story about NVIDIA or data centers and where they're popping up all over the place. And it's become clear that there's a proliferance in sort of data collection, data storage. But the big question is, what do we do with it? And a bigger question is, why are we doing it? And you can see here, like, according to folks in the industry, like, data now is becoming the lifeblood of not only manufacturing, but many different industries. And that's why we're well positioned here at GE Vernova to start to challenge this and look at, I'm the PM for Historian, like Paul had said, and data storage and very efficient storage and analytics has been my lifeblood for the last 3 years. And now we're adding in a new tool on top of it called the Data Hub, which we'll take a look at today as well in sort of the tool section of our chat. But having the data, getting it where we need it, and we heard from the video, right? Having the data to make the right decisions at the right times, that is becoming exceptionally critical to operations across various industries and especially in manufacturing. So that's why we're here today. Right. We've seen some transformations happening in data management over the last several years. I think as we move forward and see what's happening in industries, we can say a few things are really apparent to us, right? Hybrid cloud, the top box there. We've offered Historian, for example, as a hybrid cloud offering for the last 3 years. We've seen a lot more uptake this year than in years past, but it's definitely becoming paramount that folks are looking at cloud as not only a way to flatten architecture, but as a way to drive cost savings, to leverage interconnectivity amongst distributed plants, right? How do we get the best bang for our buck in terms of data management and utilization of infrastructure? And cloud is one of the ways that we're hoping the folks are going, right? We here at Vernova are a partner with AWS, but Historian is also available on Azure Cloud if necessary. But you'll see hybrid cloud becoming more and more important as we go forward, right? For low-cost storage, for high-speed scalability, for all the ways that cloud is able to leverage, data is able to leverage cloud infrastructure, it's really super important. And then centralizing data lakes, right? As our customers, as our users have more and more data that they're bringing in, and they can collect it more and more efficiently all the time, where do you put it? What do you do with it? And especially now that AI has come about, how do you get into a position where you're able to train models or get the best out of an AI type solution? And that is really centralizing your data, right? Getting it all into one place, making sure that you have a sort of all source data that you're able to train models on or to then leverage for analytics. It's no longer sufficient to have one or two sort of individual silos of data where each team in a process potentially has their own. No, we want to centralize. We want everyone to work off of the same data. At that point, you have sort of a single source of truth, which is super important. Unlocking the insights for analysis and advanced decisions with global data model, very important. One of the key things we'll talk about today is data governance, because it's one thing to be able to collect data very fast and very efficient, but that gets us quickly into trouble if we don't have a structure around the data, if we're not able to tell where it's coming from, if we're not able to tell what it's, or then be able to understand what it's telling us based on what we know of where it came from, right? If we don't have any of that sort of structure and governance in place, it's very, very hard to unlock insights. So we'll talk about a bit that more in the presentation. And then security, right? As data is coming from different places across the globe, potentially, we need to have security in place, right? In today's day and age, there are very smart people that are very adept at getting into places where they shouldn't be. And as a software and application provider, that's one of the things that we think about all the time is how do we keep data secure? How do we keep access to the products to only the folks that need to get there and nobody else, right? When we talk to customers, I'm sure we'll hear, oh, well, one of these things that we heard from the CIO is I stay awake at night wondering if my data is secure. Well, we can say all of the products on the marketplace, especially the ones from GE Vernova, place a premium on security. And so we have individual teams inside of our business whose entire job it is to test each application, right? To test connectivity, to make sure that only the right folks can get where they need to go. And so it's really one of the things that we prioritize, and we never take for granted security. And you see the next bullet there, increased security, only exposing information at the highest level. So yes, as you're looking at who is able to look and understand what data there, only expose your resources to the folks that need to have it, right? Does every team within a business need to have every data point? No, not necessarily. We see this a lot in critical infrastructure industries like electrification, for example, where different teams will have access to different data sets within the same master data set. So that's very important. And that's increasingly important depending on industry. If you look at pharma or the bio industry, yes, there's going to be a lot of rules of making sure who can get into what data and what's there. So being able to set that data governance and that security policy for your data is really super important. And then finally, how do you get value from your data, right? In today's day and age, I talked about AI just a bit ago, low code, no code solutions. We need to have tools like our very own Operations Hub or others on the market, TrendMiner, Seek, Power BI. There are so many new tools coming to the market all the time to help wrangle data, to get you insights from maybe what you're not potentially seeing, to look at pattern matching, to look at ML or AI solutions. So there are a lot of options, but the ones we really want to focus on are the ones that give you the best bang for your buck in terms of low code, no code, right? You shouldn't have to learn an entirely new language to be able to get access to the data and then to derive insights from the data, right? Democratization. Democratize the data and empower your teams. If every time someone wants to get a new metric created, they have to go learn a new language, whether it's CSS for front end or otherwise, that's hard. And that's a really big challenge in our industry to say, well, you can go build it yourself, or we can hire teams to do it. But why don't we make it very easy to go do that? So for our key example within Proficy, within GE Vernova, is Operations Hub. Low code, no code, drag and drop. Easily connect your data and then start to build visualizations based on what it's telling you. And there are a lot of tools on the market that do that. But the key to look for when you're working with this type of tool is, yes, you want to be able to get where you're going in a hurry. And you don't want to have to potentially learn a total new language or way of working to make it work for you. So that's pretty important. All right. So after talking about trends, understanding where potentially the industry is going, what are our concerns? How do we collect the data? That's a big piece of the puzzle, right? We won't have any data to analyze unless we're able to collect it very fast, very efficiently. Are there a lot of tools on the market that do this? Yes, there are a lot of protocols. We're going to look at a couple today, chiefly Grafana and Kafka, that are really exciting in the marketplace. I mean, there are others. We've worked with MQTT for years. There's always OPC-UA or other sort of classic protocols that are out there. There are other connectivity options. If you look at IGS that we offer with our products here in Proficy, the sky is the limit with what connectivity you have to bring your data in, whether it's direct from the PLC or direct from the shop floor, or potentially you're centralizing your data storage across the globe and you're able to use a protocol like Kafka or others, MQTT, OPC-UA, anything that we have out there to bring the data in from across the globe. So you can centralize. And one of the best ways, like we saw in the previous slide, centralize your data. You get the most out of it because you're able to see all of it, right? You don't have little portions of it stored in North America and another portion stored in Europe and another portion stored in Asia, potentially some in Australia, right? The more distributed it is, the harder it is to get the full value or the full understanding of all the data that's out there. So it's really very cool. And you might say, Brian, why do we care about Kafka? Why are you highlighting Kafka here today? It's one of the newest protocols that we accept into Proficy Historian, number one. And number two, it's really on the front end of high-speed data consumption and usage across different industries that we've seen. So speaking with different customers that we have, Kafka has been one of the key protocols that they've been looking for in order to make their data make sense. So you can see, if you're maybe not familiar with Kafka, it's really set up, if you're familiar with MQTT, it has the same type structure where there's sort of three pieces, data in, data out, and then a broker to control the pathway to make sure that the traffic is flowing effectively, right? So, but in Kafka, it's called a producer, a consumer, and a broker. So in our historian, we have all three of these pieces, right? You're able to go and connect to Kafka now, use it for very high speed, high throughput data positioning, right? Kafka can handle large volumes of data with low latency. That low latency is really the key of why Kafka is important. And because of the structure of how it works, built into topics, so you're able to subscribe or publish to specific topics. So if you're looking for certain data pieces from a very large data stream, you can leverage the Kafka protocol to only get what you need out of the data stream. You don't have to look at the entire thing all the time. That's very important if you're bringing in a ton of data. If you have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of tags in a historian, and you're looking to stream data from sources that are moving really high speed, whether it's in chip manufacturing or in electrification or other really, really high speed processes, maybe you're measuring at that millisecond speed. Kafka is one of the protocols that I would encourage you to look at to say, well, maybe we can get some benefit here, right? Because not only does it work really fast with low latency, right, but it's very, very scalable, right? It's horizontally scalable. So if you need more throughput, say you're hitting the limits of one Kafka producer, one Kafka consumer, one Kafka broker, you can add additional to handle that message traffic. And the scalability is really key here. So if you're measuring at that millisecond speed and you've got millions of data points, other protocols will struggle. But Kafka is a really cool one that lets us really keep up with what we're doing and make sure that the data flowing for our customers, whether they're internal or external, they're getting what they need, and there's no gap in the data that they're receiving. And then on the other end, there's no gap in the analytics that they're able to run. So Kafka is really cool. And then on top of all of that, you're able to bring in connectivity. So big data connectivity, whether it's Hadoop, Spark, Storm, other pieces, you can really easily bring a lot of data together into data lake using Kafka that you might struggle with. I mean, it's not a huge undertaking for any protocol, but certain protocols like Kafka are better suited than others. And then it allows you to have, as you're streaming the topics, you can have real-time analytics as well. So if that's something that's really important to you in your operation, I would encourage you to take a look at the Kafka protocol and see what you might be able to get, whether it would flatten your architecture, right? Maybe you're able to run more topics through Kafka brokers because you're able to scale horizontally and you don't have to have as much architecture, or it's faster, you can have fewer brokers and are able to bring in more data with less technology, with less infrastructure, or you have a need for that high-speed data to show you exactly what's happening right now in your operation. Now, it can show you historized data as well, but the combination of historized and real-time is really, really powerful. So not only can you know potentially what happened, or if you see anomalies in current data, you could look back in history and see why is that happening potentially. So Kafka is a really powerful tool when it comes to looking at data, being able to bring it in. And it's just one option of many, but it's one that I felt really important to highlight here today. All right. Grafana is another tool. When combined with Kafka, it can be a very powerful option, but Grafana works as a visualization solution. So you can see the graphic on the screen. There's a pretty involved trend there. And then there's a lot of different ways to manipulate the data. So if you're looking for an easy way to bring in streamed data, whether it's from Kafka or otherwise, be able to build Python expressions, right? Complex calculations. The more folks are bringing in data, as we've seen, working with different customers, the more analytics they're running against it, the more that makes them have a need for calculations. And some of our customers now, some folks in industry, are running 9 or 10 level deep calculations against stored data. That's really, really complex. Now, Proficy Historian has the capability to do that easily, but it's not easy. And some tools on the market may not be able to handle it, but Grafana is one of the ones where we've seen it can work, and we have customers that are using it. Other tools within Proficy are using GraphQL to do something similar with data manipulation and management and analytics. But this is another one where on the fly, real-time calculations in this place, not just data collection or data publishing, but because you're able to run complex calculations and you're able to do a lot of them, it speeds up the performance of the application. It gets you more data analyzed in a shorter amount of time, and it gets you more and better insights because you have a great visualization solution here with a tool like Grafana, where you're able to bring in everything you need, do the analysis, and get, we show trending in this case, but there are so many metrics that are built into the system that you can build out using the Grafana tool. It's really impressive to be able to see it all and then get to the analysis. And eventually if you have a problem, get to a root cause very easily. So it's really pretty cool. All right. So we've talked about sort of where data comes from. What does the modern data landscape look like so far as we've seen, right? Data sources and flow. In a modern manufacturing application, sources of data are almost infinite, right? And we can see a sort of flow here from the shop floor on the right over to visualization on the left. But in the middle, there are other sources of data. So, right, traditionally, the flow is your OT technology flows to a visualization. And maybe that's one weld robot to one visualization. So you've got a whole bunch of them. Or maybe you're aggregating, all of the weld robots from a single shop into a visualization. So you've got one to look at. And when we think visualization, it can mean different things for different folks, depending on level of the organization, right? Someone operating the machinery on the shop floor has a different need to know information. Maybe they need to know what's happening right now with the tool, or if there's a problem with it, when has it been maintained last, that sort of thing, versus someone in operations management who is probably up a level and wants to know more about sort of holistically what's going on. Is everything okay? Are there problems across the entire shop floor? Versus someone in the C-suite who's only going to care about per facility, how are we doing for throughput? How are we doing for efficiency? There are questions there. So traditionally, we would have seen shop floor to visualization. But increasingly, we're seeing demand for more and more data come in. And I'm sure some folks on this call are having a problem like this today. And if this resonates with you, please reach out after the webinar. We'd love to work with you and understand your use cases and be able to look at your data management puzzle and how can we solve for that. But you can see information from SCADA systems, from quality, other time series databases, right? Not everybody runs single source historians, for example. Some customers are multi-source. And then ERP, right? SAP, for example, has so much granular data storage in those tables that it maintains. You can bring a lot into the puzzle to look at sort of what's coming off the shop floor, combine it with anything that we see here, and then get all the integration happening together, right? And this integration is one of the sort of keys to our time when we think of data management, where traditionally it was very simple. Today it's a bit harder because there's so many connectivity options and there's so much need for interconnectivity between products and between data streams and other places. You can see here, there's just 5 across the bottom of the slide, right? Shop floor, maybe that's another 5. We represent it very easily with the shop floor OT, but how many work cells is that in a facility that could have to go into visualization? And so if you're building a one-size-fits-all type visualization to show in the lunchroom of a facility, so everybody on lunch break knows what's going on, it gets a bit harder. And so that's when we start to think about, are there tools on the market that could make this easy, right? Can we essentially automate data collection? Historians on the market can do that. Proficy Historian is probably the fastest and best option for this. With some of the new hyperscale stuff we're releasing at the end of November, you'll see a big jump, up to data collection somewhere near 1 billion samples per minute. So very, very fast data collection. But then the problem is, okay, we have a ton of data. We end up in a map like this. Where do we go from there? What tools can we leverage to make it easier for us and for our customers, whether they're internal or external, to get the value that they need? All right. So when you start to think about tools, Paul had mentioned at the beginning that I'm the PM for a new product here called Data Hub. And this is really the Proficy offering that will help our customers leverage multi-source data inside of Proficy and outside of Proficy, and how do we get value from it for our customers, right? How can someone have easy connectivity options between their plant app system, right? Maybe their MES is there and their SAP system or ERP, and then other shop floors, whether it's a SCADA or a historian or other things running there, right? And then there's really 2 key points when you're thinking about selecting a tool that might help you work on data collection, data aggregation, data analysis, all of the sort of pivotal points, data governance within the data pipeline, where it's super important that a tool does all of these and makes it easy for you in the end to do connectivity and then get onto the analytics. So you can think of it in sort of 2 frames: faster time to value, right? As a user of a tool, you should be able to set it up, do very easy connectivity, start to get value from the tool in a short period of time, right? You shouldn't have to set up a new model every time you go to use the tool, or Every time you're setting up a new factory in the tool, you shouldn't have to go in and build a new model. Or if you need to make changes, they should be easy. It shouldn't take all afternoon to make simple changes in your data model or in your connectivity or anything like that. And so you can see when we think about data management now within Proficy with Data Hub, we're thinking faster time to value and quicker decision making. So how do we get the data to a point where it needs to be for you or your customers to make the decisions that they need to make, right? There's some keys here that we're going to talk about, right? Model templates. So how do you take all of the data and make sure that it's structured in such a way that it can then be easily fed to different systems, or it's structured in such a way that data coming from different systems is easily utilized in something like a unified namespace. So even if it's all representing different things potentially, it's unified in that everyone in the process, every application knows where it's coming from and what it means because you've taken the time to build out the structure. And then that is really helpful when you think of visualizing and scaling. So because you know where the data is coming from, you can then get to much more granular analytics that show you much more of your operation or get you much better insights. And then a bigger piece of this, as we think of the modern era, right? You're scaling. You want it to grow, you want it to easily grow. You don't want to have to do a lot of work every time you think about growing. And then further on to that, because data fabric is included after unified namespace, you can start to train models. You can leverage MCP to use different protocols within AI. So it makes it much easier to then get the insight, right? Quicker decision making. If you're able to flow all of the data that you can to an AI solution and you've trained it properly, maybe it's going to highlight something in your operation proactively that you haven't seen, or it's going to give you insight that perhaps you've missed or that has been ignored or has been hard to interpret. It could give you those options, and it could lead to really good bonus for your business, right? Look, less downtime, higher throughput, better factory overall efficiency. These are all great things. And utilizing different tools in the marketplace, or especially Proficy Data Hub, which will be available mid-year next year, it's a great option. All right. So when you think about data governance and pipeline, there are really a few areas that are key. Now, we'll highlight them like we've just done through the lens of Proficy Data Hub. But when you think about data manipulation in general, there are sort of the 4 ways that you would want to deal with it, or 4 things you want to account for when you're thinking about data governance. And those are structuring the data. So make sure that it's in a model structure that is easily understood, widely accepted. Data Hub uses ISA 95, but there are others out there. Maybe you're a fan of the SESB models, or there are other models out there that are easily extensible that you'll want to follow. The key is your data needs a structure. It can't just be willy-nilly data all over the place. It needs to follow a pattern. And then exchanging, right? How do you get data? We saw on the previous slide all the different sources that flow up to the cloud area with the shop floor and the visualization coming out of it. That's a tough one, right? Interconnectivity between disparate applications is not always easy. The good part for Proficy Data Hub is it works with the Proficy product. So as a suite, if you're using one or more Proficy products, or you're pointing a customer in a direction to use one or more Proficy products, they'll get really great throughput and be able to leverage all of these options with Proficy Data Hub right out of the box. So it makes exchanging data very simple. Whereas even today, if you have multiple Proficy products, it's not always easy to do the interconnectivity. But with Data Hub, because we're using the asset model, it enhances the interoperability, improves the performance, makes it much simpler for everyone to work together and for the data to flow from application to application to application. And then eventually get you to visualization and reason. So visualizing, at the end of the day, you're going to do all the work of data governance because it makes building and getting visualization easier. And then the final reasoning portion gets much easier once you've done the other steps. So you're able to see what see what the data is telling you, understand what's out there. And it really, in the long run, will get insights that maybe you've never even thought of before, or match patterns for you that maybe you hadn't considered, or get you to a point where you're so far ahead in your maintenance cycle, you're entirely proactive, or you can get to a point in your operation where you could run 2 shifts and have a certain period of time where you have just a skeleton crew in the facility. You don't need to run a full shift because you know everything that's going on. All of the things are proactive. You can get to a point where if there's a problem, you're able to then connect to a Maximo system, for example, and send out a work order. And this all starts with structuring the data and exchanging the data and then getting into reasoning. But it's really super cool, and where we can go is really very exciting. we'll build this one out so we can talk about it. All right. So you can see we had the previous slide where in the middle was the cloud, but we've replaced that cloud with Proficy Data Hub in this slide. And that's the cool part about it, is it's now going to be the interconnectivity. You can see the component parts of the Proficy Data Hub in the center there in dull yellow and bright yellow. So enterprise model, source configurations, unified namespace. The data bus, as a user, you'll never see, but it is one of the key components that's running behind the scenes to make sure that the interconnectivity between the different applications in Proficy or the others that you see on the right side of the screen there are connected. Everything flows. And this is the modern era of how these applications are working. Now, there are other options on the marketplace when you think of data modeling specifically, or ability to get data into a storage location and then out to analytics from different products. Yes, they exist, but none are engineered to work specifically with Proficy and other tools that we know our customers are using, like SAP or communication systems or maintenance systems or others that are out there, right? We have the distinct advantage of having a large customer base of really, really large global manufacturers. You may be among them, that we've been able to talk to and understand sort of what challenges are they facing, where are they going, and this is how we're solving those challenges, right? Bringing in that interconnectivity, the unified namespace, making it very easy to then move your data around, configuration. And if you're a Proficy user, there's no better option on the market than Proficy Data Hub to make sure that you're getting the best out of each of your applications. And it also makes a great case if you're not using more than one of the Proficy products to really give us a look and understand if you could leverage another Proficy product in your tech stack, because we're making the connectivity so easy, which is really very cool. So you can see being able to bring it in the modern era where now tools will exist to make interconnectivity simple, whereas previously you will have to do all the connectivity yourself. So the tool is really what's modern in this data governance context to be able to understand what the data is telling you and get information out of there. So a really very cool option. All right, so up to this point, you might think, wow, Brian, this sounds really cool. We know we're having issues with data on our factory floor, or we know we have silos of data, but can you show an example of what it might look like in the modern era of being able to bring all the data together using unified namespace, using all the tools that are provided to get an example of what we might see on the factory floor? And I can say, yes, absolutely, I can. So we'll build this out, right? Maybe you're asking a question of your data, right? In today's era, we no longer have to write queries or learn SQL or become a programmer or even a quasi-programmer to get the information out of our data systems, right? We can use natural language processing and other tools to simply interrogate the data with our voice and say, hey, what potentially is going on here? So in this case, we could say, show me pumps that have an alarm status. Very important for some applications, right? We want to make sure that alarms are triaged and dealt with, and we understand what they're telling us and where they came from. So we can start to get, fewer and fewer alarms and are able to triage them and get better and better at our operations and more efficient. So you can see, right? You're able to bring up different sources of data. So you can see graphic data here on the bottom, and then you can see the schematics of the pumps, and it brings up 4 in this instance, and 2 of them are in alarm status. So it will tell you about those. And you can see there are differences in the metadata about each pump. Like some of the flow rates are a bit different, but 2 are not alarmed, 2 are alarmed. As an operator, this is pretty key information that we need to know. So what do we do about it is the question, right? You're able to see it brings up all the information there, but it didn't quite answer our question, right? So now we know we have 2 in alarm state, but let's dig a bit further and see what it can tell us, right? So now we're able to say, well, is this potentially a maintenance issue? So show me the pump status for what's been maintained in the last year. Okay, well, it can bring up the 2 that are in alarm status, and you can see, well, 1 is running and 1 is stopped. Okay, running is probably fine. We probably don't need to focus there. But the pump that stopped, maybe that's a problem. Maybe we need that pump to continue working. And you can see we're able to bring together all the data, like the last service date, the hour since the last service, and then the next service due date. One of these is drastically different than the others. So it's important to be able to pull this out. And using the Data Hub, we didn't have to build any connectivity, right? We're able to have all the data structured, bring it all together, link it between the applications. Now you're pulling data from a SCADA system, you're pulling data from a historian, you're potentially pulling it from other sources, and then you're showing it as a visualization. So it's very quick, it's easy to understand, and it uses all the modern data stuff that we've talked about up until now in the presentation to get to where we can just show a metric, and now we can start to dig in, and you can say, okay, well, that's a problem that this pump hasn't been maintained in a year and 1,800 hours since it was last maintained. That's a lot. Maybe we should fix that. So it brings all the data together, and because you're able to categorize it and have the unified namespace built in and then have all the data exchange between products, you're able to get to a point where the total of the products, the sum of all of it, is greater than what each individual product can provide to you. So it makes it a very valuable option within your tech stack. All right. So we'll take a look at the sort of the 4 components that we covered earlier. Reasoning being sort of the biggest one here. Now, when you think about reasoning, do you want your data to be able to inform you on decision making, get you into a place where it's very easy to take action instead of having to interpret yourself what data is telling you? We have tools that are able to do that. And so MCP, Model Context Protocol, is a sort of new to the market protocol that has come about as AI has matured that makes it very, very easy to interact with AI. And it brings a lot of reasoning options to the table that, as a user of the product, give you options about where you would like to go, right? Data-driven, context-aware decisions. That's the key here. So we just saw that we have a problem on our pump. We can use the reasoning built into the MCP protocol and with Data Hub to push us in a direction. Maybe it will send a work order to Maximo through interconnectivity, or it will alert plant staff that they need to do something about this, and then they are able to make the decision. It can be configured how you need it to. And every modern option is going to have some of this built in, but none of it is built specifically for a Proficy like these are, where because we know the products in and out, we're able to really get down into the very granular information about each product, be able to bring all the data that it provides into a single context, and then you as the user just get the option to act on what we're telling you or what you're seeing and what we're able to present to you based on what we know. So you can see at the bottom of the left-hand side of the slide, right? Improve reliability, optimize energy and throughput, reduce unplanned downtime, and elevate overall plant performance. These are the objectives of the reasoning option within Proficy Data Hub. Because we can do it, and because we have all the information coming out of the products, we're able to build it out for you and train models effectively so that we can meet each use case, and you as a user simply get the benefit, right? You no longer have to build all this out and do all of the reasoning and quality activities or lean activities, right? We can make your time much more efficient by leveraging a tool. All right. Organization. We talked before, and this is really the tip of the spear when it comes to how do we get more information out of our data, right? You can see because you're organized, because you've structured your data, because you're going through that data governance process, easier visualizations, easier contextualization, and integration of siloed data. Because we're able to bring it all together into a standardized model context, it makes it much easier to feed, and it gets you down to the level of the reasoning that we just looked at, because everything is organized and we don't have to guess where things are from or guess what attributes are coming with each individual piece. And with the Data Hub, you're able to take each of those individual objects and reuse them. So once you've created them, they don't go away. If you've created them in previous versions of a model, for example, if you're using Historian today, or you're using the SCADA products and you have models built, you can carry them forward and build on them, build off of them, enhance them. The model within Historian specifically, like, this is a lot more usable than that. So it gives a lot more option, right? And because it links everything together in a very logical fashion, it makes it very easy to then carry forward. And then if you're adding footprint to your facility or to your business, or moving and changing how lines are configured, it makes it very easy to copy and paste models and copy and paste attributes and make it very simple. So you're not doing every individual piece. You don't have to go to that weld robot when you move it to a different site and say, I have to recreate this now. No, you've already got your weld robot. You could change it. You could add attributes to it. But if it's staying exactly the same, just copy and paste that object into the new model for the new facility, and you're off and ready to go. So it makes it very simple. But organization is one of the key pillars of data governance, and it's probably one of the most important because it's foundational, and you won't be successful unless you do this piece. All right. Then presentation, right? You work through all the organization, everything is where it needs to be, everything is connected. Where do you go from here, right? How do you get value from all of that work that you've done? And that's in the visualization piece, presentation. You want to be able to see what your data is telling you. Now, that means different things to different people. So if you are a line operator, you care about certain things. If you're a manager in the mid-level of the organization, you're going to care about a wider purview of how things are going. So maybe as an operator, you care about the metrics on one machine. As a manager, you care about the metrics on 10 machines. As you work up in the organization, the needs grow of what information that you're going to need or what level of data you need to be presented to be effective at your role. So if you're in the C-suite, maybe you want very granular data. Maybe you just want a red, green, yellow map of all your facilities that shows whether they're running or if they're stopped, or comparisons between efficiency for different plants. It depends. But because you've gone through all the steps, right, you get to a point where you can have auto-generated operating screens or executive dashboards because you've gone through and you've categorized the data, you've built the models, you've tied it all together, you follow the data governance process, and it gets you to a point where you can then leverage tools to make your life a lot easier and get you to be more proactive, right? As an operator, you don't have to wait for something to go wrong. You can look at a trend in real time and say, oh, the speed on that conveyor is decreasing, or, oh, vibration on those rollers is increasing. We want to stop that. Or, oh, that filler has gone down in flow rate or number of containers filled over the last hour. Something may be happening. Before we have downtime, before we have a problem, let's get there. And you get there by leveraging the tools and the interconnectivity and everything that's there. It's really very cool. And then the data exchange, right? You could build visualizations off of one product, but it would be very one-dimensional. So being able to link everything together, get information from across different platforms, different tools, different applications, Proficy or otherwise, in this case, put you in a really good place to be able to build better visualizations, to train better models, to get better insights, because you're adding facets to the puzzle. You're bringing more things together to give more viewpoints, to get a better holistic view of what's going on, right? So instead of just looking at historic data, maybe you're looking at real-time data, maybe you're looking at inventory data when combined with production data to see, okay, well, is there a change in inventory level when we change in production? Or is it seasonal? Or what are the contributing factors to changes that we're observing in our operation or downstream impacts to decisions that we're making? Perhaps we get there. But being able to bring everything together, every application, and get their viewpoint is what makes it possible to do that. So it's really a very powerful tool. And this one is another piece of sort of the data puzzle where, if possible, bring more sources together, right? That might mean you're building a data lake to store them, but in the end, it's going to serve you much better as a customer of that data to get a better viewpoint and to understand what's going on across your environment, right? Now, you could do this individually for each facility that you have, if you have more than one. If you have just one facility, relatively straightforward. If you have more than one facility, you could do it for each, and then you could do one enterprise level across your footprint to show what's there, or you could leverage all of that data connectivity with different tools to be able to bring it up to one overarching data lake, for example, that covers all of your facilities. And that's more or less doable or more or less complicated depending on the size of your operation and cybersecurity rules and appetite for change and all of that. And change management is a key piece in this as well, right? When you're doing data governance, perhaps it's different from what you've ever done. Perhaps it's a change from what you're doing today. Maybe you're doing a bit of it, but you need to do more, or you'd like to do more to be able to get more insight from your data. So data governance and change management really live together as well. But these are the key pieces of the data governance puzzle when you think about tools like Proficy Data Hub or others on the market that are going to get you this sort of throughput and sort of insight into your data. Right. So let's take a look at what some of this looks like, and then we will jump into Q&A. All right, so you can see the model structure built out for Proficy Data Hub is really very structured. If you've seen our Configuration Hub application, you'll notice it's very similar to the UI that we use there, where the left-hand side will hold all of the information in your tree. The center is your sort of work pane, and on the right will have metadata based on what you've selected in the center work pane. And there's a lot of different ways to interact with the data or to move things around, make sure it's structured, make sure you can copy and paste those models, and then they're all saved to a central repository. So the model you see here, there's several pumps in it. All of those pumps are reusable, or you could bring in different attributes or different pieces of equipment depending on what you've designed. So it makes it very fast to work with and very easy. So excellent UI to make things fast, easy, and efficient. Once you've done all that structure, right? We talked about it previously, right? Get your model structure set, then you're able to drive for visualization. Now, in our tool, Data Hub, you're able to tie visualizations to certain objects on the model, right? Maybe there are key pieces of visualization, whether it's a flow or a speed or an RPM or other attributes that you will be able to tie in to build visualizations that are tied to each individual category. So, you have a pump, all right, you're gonna want flow rate, or a conveyor, you're gonna want speed, or an impeller, you want RPM, that sort of thing. So you're able to tie it all together, and because you're able to bring it together essentially permanently, you'll always have those visualizations tied to those individual categories, and you won't have to recreate them each time, which is a really big time saver. And then looking at sort of outside of Proficy, what do you want to bring in? You could bring in an SOP, for example, or you could bring in a video feed of a certain tool, or you could bring in other pieces, right? Build out a holistic image that would be used by an operator for this piece of machinery. And does this mean that you could potentially get by with fewer operators? Maybe. Does it mean that you can make the operators you have much more efficient? Yes, I think so. And because you're able to show different things to different folks or different levels of the organization, it makes sense to have each of these. Like, this would be great for a frontline operator or a maintenance person or someone in charge of making sure that the equipment runs effectively. Take a triage. Because they're able to see the data points, they can move up in the process. They don't have to wait for it to break to fix it, right? You can see what's there. And then if there's a question of how to run it effectively, you're able to use an SOP, for example. So it's really a very powerful option to be able to get a lot of data together and show different views to the different folks that might need it. All right, so that is sort of our talk on data governance. I think now we can open it up to Q&A.
Go to the orange chat icon to answer.
Paul, I think we're having a bit of trouble hearing you. It sounds like bells are ringing when you're speaking.
I'm not sure if we can hear now.
It's the same.
Okay, I'm not sure what's going on.
Now you're back. Now it sounds fine.
Back?
So
Okay, all right.
whatever you
great.
just did is the trick, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Brian, for that presentation. That was excellent. So just wanted to show everybody again the orange chat icon, if you can go there and enter your questions. And while we wait for that, I want to point out the pink survey icon again. Again, your feedback is what helps us make our program better. So please take some time to fill out that feedback as well. I also wanted to point out a couple of other options. So everyone from the solution provider community gets free instructor-led training seats every year. Don't forget about this benefit. You can reach out to me and we can talk about which ones you want to use there. Certifications and training, we're always ensuring that our solution providers are completing the certifications. Those show up on your partner finder and they make your profile stronger. And when we're asked for recommendations for system integrators, we're looking for the ones that have the strongest profile. So please continue to do that as well. I saw a few people joined our LinkedIn group during the presentation here. So please look for the GE Vernova Solution Provider LinkedIn group. Make sure you're part of that. We put out a lot of information on there as well. And then mark your calendars. On December 9th, we have our next webinar in the series, Power Up Your Skills with SCADA Ultimate. So please take a look for that, register for that, and hope to see you on that event as well. So let me take a look at the questions that have come in. The first one, Brian, how can companies position themselves to have an advantage in data?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think thinking about what we've talked about today, one of the easiest ways is number one, start to understand your objectives as a company of what you're looking to get, right? Once you know the outcomes that you're looking for, you can work back and start to look at, are you collecting the right types of data, or have you been collecting the right types of data? And where are the gaps, right? You could do a gap analysis and say, okay, well, we need machine shop data, or we need data from this place or that place to get to our objective. Then you're able to work back and look at sort of how do you get that data and what sort of tools are available, like Proficy Data Hub that we've seen today, to bring it in from different places. And then, yes, start to work on it. It's really a puzzle. Put the pieces in place, and then the final piece of the puzzle will be you get that advantage. So collect the data, understand what data you're collecting, understand where you want to go with the data, and then you'll have the visualizations there as well. So it's potentially not the easiest thing, but it is a process to follow.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
Is there an easy and fast one-size-fits-all approach to data management?
There is not. Like we talked about data governance today, we could say that that's an easy and fast approach, but everyone's data journey will be different, right? Depending on if you have 10,000 data points that you've stored for 10 years, that's a lot. That's going to be a lot more than someone who's just coming on to a new company who is starting their data management from scratch. But also everyone's going to have individual goals when it comes to data management. So it's really, like I said in the previous answer, understanding what you'd like to get from your data and then being able to work back into do we have enough data collected? Do we need more? Are we collecting the right data? And be able to work there. But no, it won't be one size fits all for every company. Now, luckily, there are tools on the market, and we've highlighted a few in this presentation today that folks could use, whether it's Proficy Historian from GE Vernova, or there are others on the market. I won't say who they are, but have the tools available, Data Hub, Proficy Historian, visualizations, Operations Hub, or otherwise. And then you can start to build the puzzle that way. And the tools will be similar for every user, but the path to get there will be different.
Excellent. Next question. How can a company prepare for the future data demands of AI?
That's a good one. So data collection is the first thing that I would highlight there. Make sure that you have as much data of all possible types that you possibly can. Because when it comes to training models or being able to leverage what AI has the potential to do, it needs information to be trained on. So the more information you're able to feed it, the better it will be. Now, taking that a step further, if you put any of that data through a data governance process, like we talked about, making sure that everything is categorized and organized and you know where it's all coming from and you can sort of understand where it's coming from, what it's telling you, you can then get the best results from your AI modeling adventure because you already know what information you're putting in. So when the AI is generating answers or giving you insights that are coming back in the testing phase, you can make sure that what it's telling you is true and accurate. And that always works best with the most data.
Excellent. Excellent. What is the best way to get quick insights from our data?
Absolutely. Start using tools, right? Do a quick organizational exercise and then just jump right in with tools and see where they will take you. It's not always easy to just say, we're going to do it alone. Leverage folks whose core competency is delivering insights to you, like GE Vernova, where we have the tools available. We have the knowledge available within our staff, right? We have services folks. We have the integrator community. We have a lot of different pieces of infrastructure that we can leverage for a customer to say, we can get you off to a quick start, right? And it's often sort of explained as build versus buy. And in this case, I would leverage the buy option if you're really looking to get fast information, fast insights from your data, because the tools are available, they're already built. And then we have folks that can easily leverage them for you, and they will get you to where you need to go in a hurry.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. So this is the last question, and then I'll ask you if you have anything you want to leave the group with.
Sure.
How does government regulation affect data management?
Yes, that's a great question, because we have seen different rules, different laws come into effect over the last 5 or 6 years in different places, whether it's data retention laws in Europe or laws in the Middle East for wellhead information, for example, in the oil industry or just across the globe. There are different use cases that have been highlighted and different laws that have come in where you will have to follow them depending on where you do business. And it could be a one and done where you're in a single region and you follow those laws specifically, and it governs how you store the data, what kind of encryption that you use, who can access the data, that sort of thing. Or maybe you're a multi-regional company or a global company where all of the regional nuances of data protection or data management law would come into effect. So it's really important to make sure you work in lockstep with your legal organizations while you're setting up your data management and data governance process to make sure that you don't cross any of those red lines or have folks knock on your door that maybe you don't want to. So it is very important to follow local regulation.
Fantastic. So that's the last question, Brian. Is there anything you would like to leave the group with?
Sure. I think the final thought from today, right? We started with data being the lifeblood of analysis and of companies today. I would say if this is the first time folks are hearing about data governance and data management, please start today to come up with a strategy, because as data proliferates in your organization, it only gets harder to manage and to work with different groups depending on how much data they have. So start today and the process will be much easier.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you, Brian. I think this was very insightful. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everyone who has joined the call today. Please take a look at this when we send the information out again. If there's any further question, you can always follow up with us. And then I'll just mention again, we're here to help support you to ensure that you can roll out GE software. So if there's anything I can do to help with that, to get you support, to get you education, to help you with opportunities, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And we hope to see you on the next webinar on December 9th. Thank you.